Absolutely do. So we need to start to be clever about how we use our AI and how much energy that particular form of AI uses. So where you need high accuracy, then you can use a digital system. We're now looking at quantum computing, which gives you lower accuracy and has much lower energy usage. But you could use that for areas of AI where you really don't need a high level of accuracy and it's more for enjoyment. So it's a bit like saying, we're going to use precision laser tooling to cut my bread. I really don't need that. I think that's what we're doing in AI at the moment. I can use a bread knife, it's fine. Let's say you've got three people. You've got your nuclear guys, you've got your renewables guys, and you've got your gas guys, and you've got a bucket of water, and they've all got buckets of water, and you've got a central tub, and you need a certain amount of water. The nuclear guy pours theirs in first, then the solar guy and the renewables guys pours theirs in next. And then if there's any more needed, the gas guys pour it in. And each one defines what price they will pour that in, and therefore if you're the last one, you define the total price of everything. So one of the reasons I set up a business was because that I felt that was one of the more effective ways of trying to counter it. So yeah, I mean, I absolutely recognize that it's part of what they do. It's part of what their business model is. I mean, getting angry about it, I guess, no, I didn't really get angry about it. I just tried to figure out ways to get around it.
Just one quick thing before we get into the episode. This podcast is brought to you by Ecology, the UK's most trusted climate action platform. They help businesses to reduce their emissions, restore our planet, and report their progress for every step of their climate journey. If you'd like to learn more, check them out with the link in the show notes. Let's get on with the episode. Juliet Davenport, thank you very much for joining me on the Climate Unfucked podcast.
It's lovely to be here, Rob, and it'll be an interesting conversation. Let's see where we go.
Yes. I'm really interested to start off with, I've heard you talk about that conversations about energy should be about people rather than power stations or pipelines or coal mines. What do you mean by that, and why do you say that?
I think for quite a long time, we've slightly forgotten the end user in the conversation. So I always remember having a conversation when sort of wind farms were being considered and being thought about without subsidy. And I remember a wind developer came to talk to me and said, what should we do? What should we do? And I said, well, the first thing you need to do is think about your product. What is your product? You're producing electricity, but is it what your customer actually wants and needs at the times it needs it? And I think we have separated that conversation. So from the engineering to the end use and product design in the energy market for years. And you've either had policy that has been thinking about infrastructure, or it's been thinking about investment. What it hasn't really done, and it's done thought about consumer protection, but it hasn't really connected those two. And that's I think that's always been a bit of a lost opportunity, because actually if we designed from an engineering point of view a product that delivers to the end customer needs without having to rely so much on centralized systems to manage all of that for us, then we might have actually been in a better situation today.
So what does it mean if it's designed for end consumer need? Like, can you paint that picture in someone's head if they don't understand what that means?
Yeah, so if you think about, so if we have a wind turbine, the original support mechanisms in the UK were to design wind turbines to absolutely maximize the total amount of power output. So what we call megawatt hours. So total units of power, maximize output. Doesn't matter what time of day it was produced, what time of year it was produced, it's just maximum output. Now, you could design wind turbines in a slightly different way so that actually they had a much smoother output. So the total output would be less, but you wouldn't have the variability, as much variability, if you slightly tweaked the technology. But a lot of the design was originally done to maximize, not to produce this slightly different curve. Very similar with solar. So quite often you see, if you've got a maximized on a solar park, you'll get this very large peak in the middle of the day. But actually you can design solar parks so that they have a smoother output, but the output might not be as great, but it might be more valuable to the overall system. And so when I talk about thinking about consumers, I think you've got to say that customers aren't just going to use their power in the middle of the day from a solar park. They're going to kind of want it throughout the day. So what should you be doing? And what we've relied on is a centralized system to manage that that interface between the customer and the generator. And the challenge with that is that unless the economics are working all the way through correctly, then you get incorrect alignment between the two and an additional cost, which is where we are today. So my view would be is that if we had originally designed the technology from a product design perspective, we would be in a much better place today.
What do you mean the economics aren't like working all the way through? Because that seems to be like part of the price that what's being produced is one thing, but then like the price of the production is very, very important to its success as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've done is that we've said that we can incentivize production even then when we don't use it. And so unless you find a really good way of managing that or find a good use for that excess, then economically that is inefficient. So essentially what we've done is we've put an instrument in place which is economically inefficient between one side and the other side. And it was really interesting because I think everybody did that. The original designs on policy were there to really try and bolster an industry and start an industry in the UK, a renewables industry, but had no thinking to the end user. It was all about bolstering the industry, not about actually what the end user would be. And because it was such a small part of the industry, it was a kind of blip in terms of what impact it had on the overall system. But obviously today it's very different. And so we've
Mm.
kind of built that obsolescence into our system from the original support mechanisms that we put in place. Now we're getting better at smarter at making sure we don't build that in anymore. So the new CFDs are basically contract for differences, which is support mechanisms for renewables, are penalizing renewables if they produce when power prices go negative. So there is starting to be some economic signals that are coming through those contracts, but the original ones still maximize. And this is the challenge, is that unless you give the responsibility to the engineering team to make this technology effective for an end user, then you just design it for a policy outcome, and that policy outcome may not always be right.
And how much of the problem do you think is stems from how the wind turbine or how the solar panel is designed, and how much is like bad actors or um, like a variety of other factors?
I think most of it is how we've designed our implementation strategy. Yeah, so I think a lot of it comes from the essentially the engineering, the site design of the products that we put in place. So if you told me that I had a contract, but I had to balance it, I had to produce the same amount of power all day long from a solar site, I would just go and put batteries on my solar site. I mean, that's a
Mm.
very simplistic way of thinking about it, but that's one option. There will be many options to how you could manage that, whether you put rotating solar panels in, or there's lots of different options in there to come up with the best option to deliver a fixed amount of power during the day. But we've never really asked those technologies to do that. What we've said is we'll just do what you think. We'll ask you to maximize your output rather than create a better designed output.
So actually, instead of the government making a tender for, can you just build as much power as you can, if they made a tender for, can you create clean power that is consistent,
Yeah.
then the response would be, it would be one of scenarios you suggested, like turning solar panels or batteries or another, but
Yeah.
the end outcome would serve the consumer much better.
Yeah.
Okay. And how would that impact how much people are paying?
So that is it. That's a that's the
It's a big
golden
question.
question. I mean, in my sort of theoretical economic approach to that, it should be better. So if you are asking a particular actor in an economic system to behave in one way, but actually the output you need is a different outcome, then there's an economic cost somewhere in their middle. So if both of them are more aligned, then you're going to get a better economic efficiency. So that is the kind of natural state of things. And so that is my theory, is that we should be thinking about what are the mechanisms that we can promote generation to be more thoughtful about how it produces its power and when it produces it.
Okay. And because you advised the government on the 2030 clean power plan.
Yeah, I was on
don't
the
you?
advisory board. I mean, like, we didn't always agree with everything that was written, but we did our best to kind of give our points of view and hopefully influence it. Yeah.
And how does that, what you suggested, because I suppose to someone listening to this, that they go, okay, yeah, I can see why that would make sense, like the contract or the tender or the design of the turbine, but not
Yeah.
probably something that they have any ability to influence.
Yeah.
But you, like in that position of advising the government, you were, and what was the response like?
So we've definitely started to see the contracts change. The contracts for difference have improved. I think the next thing we have to see change is how the network system operator operates and what the signals they are sending to the operational side of it. The issue you've got is you've got a bunch of generation that's already in place that's been incentivized to maximize output, not maximize product. Let's say let's call product what you and I need in our homes, and output what generators do. So there is a mismatch between what we need and what they produce.
And
And
what
the
I
point,
need, sorry,
sorry,
but just to clarify, what I need as the end user is consistent power when I need it.
yes. So
Yeah. Okay.
so it's much easier if they produce a consistent amount of power during the day. That's not exactly what you need, but it's a lot easier to manage for the system than if it's variable during the day, basically.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
So if it's forecastable, if they know what you're going to produce, then they can manage the rest of it around you. If you become unpredictable, so if you're my unpredictable generator, it's much more difficult for me to manage you, if that makes sense.
Okay. And in terms of like fossil fuel based generation of power, does is the way that works easier for the current model because it's
Yeah.
just turned on and off like when it's needed, and
So
therefore that's why it wins in this
and
scenario.
this brings us to another challenge in the market. So I think it was probably 30 years ago, there were about 30 to 40 generators in the UK, mainly fossil fuel, some nuclear. And if they needed to be turned up or down, somebody ring up the generator and basically ask them to switch on. I mean, that's simplistic, but that's not far off what used to happen. And there was, I mean, somebody told me once that there was this thing called Monday morning-itis, where everybody was a bit slow on a Monday morning, and if they needed the generators to turn up, it took a bit longer than normal because everybody was a bit dozy, literally. So you've got a system that's how it used to work. And what we've done to it is we've put a bunch of renewables on it that go the opposite way to what they're normally used to. So the people generate in people's homes and then it goes up the lines rather than down the line. So that's an additional complication. They don't always know exactly how much is on the system. So that was a real challenge in the sort of 2010s, 2015s, is National Grid just didn't know how much power was where. And now what we're asking them to do is to essentially have very good data and use algorithms to think through what power you should be using and how you should dispatch it and what you should switch off and what you switch on. And I think at the moment we are still in an evolution on that. I don't think the data and the software is good enough to actually do that job properly.
So because I think something that if someone's in this world will be quite familiar with hearing is that the technology isn't the problem. It's like the implementation. But here it's kind of, you're saying the software and like that's a big part of the problem.
The
Is that
data and the software that's implemented by the central systems, I think, is still not at the cutting edge. And I think the other part is although the technology may not be the problem, I don't think we've developed the technology in necessarily the best way to deliver the best product. So what we've done is we've created quite a big problem to manage to deliver something to yours and my home. And in the middle, somebody's got to manage all of that. So the energy system operator has somehow got to take this maximized megawatt hours, this maximized energy product, and convert it into a product that you and I can use in our homes. And that's where the big issue is now. So we've made the problem bigger by not designing the technology in the right way. And then we've asked this central system that's used to dealing with 30 generators to deal with millions of generators and then deliver this product. And that's your challenge. And the point is that the central system, as far as I've understood, is still not doing the best job. It's doing a job. It's making sure that lights are still on. But is it doing it at the best cost? And the answer is, I think, probably not.
And whose responsibility is it to fix it, I guess, is the $1 million question.
Well, NESO, I mean, really, it's NESO, which is now part of government. So the question is,
what does NESO
NESO
stand
is
for?
the national, oh God, you're going to ask me a question I might not know the answer. National Electricity System Operator.
Okay.
And the question I get, I mean, this is my question constantly, and I find myself asking it a lot, is what actually are they being incentivized to do, and how are they being incentivized? Because one of the challenges that you have is when you ask an engineering organization, which is what it was originally, because it was originally part of National Grid, to adapt to be a data first organization. That's quite a difficult transition. And so we're asking it to do quite a difficult job. And where it would have been very comfortable is providing secure electricity to everybody's homes, which is very important. But what it wouldn't necessarily have always been incentivized to do is to do that at the best cost. And I think this is the challenge we've now got is what does best cost look like? What are the KPIs that you'd measure the national system operator against? And how can we make sure that they're using all these new tools that are coming forwards? I was talking to a couple of entrepreneurs this morning who one's come out of, I think he's ex Formula One. He used to do all the digital analysis for Formula One cars, and an entrepreneur he's working with, and they are looking at how can you do better forecasting 4 or 5 hours out on the national grid system, and then potentially integrate things like Bitcoin or green hydrogen and green ammonia to balance the system, particularly in places like northern Scotland, so you don't have to switch wind turbines off as much. And so there's new ideas coming through. And the question is, how do we get those to be starting to influence the existing players? Because it's when you've got a very large organization that's done things in the same way for a very long time, these new ideas are very difficult to percolate through because they don't trust them, which is fair enough. That's their job. But at the same time, how can we move at pace to really embrace some of these innovations that we're seeing coming through?
Yeah. I'm intrigued about this. We kind of touched on it, but like about bills and carbon, like how much people pay and how much carbon is produced in the energy that they get.
Yeah.
And I think that the other side, like to kind of say that if you want lower carbon, it's going to cost more, and that energy bills are going up because of trying to decarbonize. Can you like have both declining bills and declining carbon in the energy mix, or is it like it's a trade-off? It's one without the other.
I think there's some bumps in the road, is my personal view, but I think longer term, yes, absolutely. I think one of the challenges is that we built a system around a high carbon world, and we kind of it never really had to pay for that system. And what we're asking to do now is transform to a lower carbon system in a world where we haven't done any investment in our infrastructure for 20 years. So we've had this full stop on infrastructure investment, whether it was in a high carbon world or a low carbon world. And so there's a certain amount you would have had to have done anyhow. And so we're seeing that halt. so we're basically playing catch up for things that haven't been done in the past. And then what you have to remember is that if you weren't going to go down a low carbon world, you still have to pay to go down a high carbon world. I mean, you still got to install new generators, whether, I mean, sort of, we're looking at new nuclear. Those would go ahead whether this was a low carbon world or a high carbon world. You probably install those anyhow. You're looking at, you then need to put new CCGTs in, which are not inexpensive as well. So this concept that there is no cost to an alternative to the low carbon world is not true. That you absolutely have to continue investing in the system. The longer term, I absolutely think if with a combination of low carbon technologies in house, but at a national level, so decarbonized local generation as well as national generation, plus a system that reflects time of use. So one of the things that we haven't done enough of is really try to encourage people that power costs different amounts at different times of day. We do it in simplistic terms, so there's some tariffs that you can do, but most people, if they get on a train in the UK, know there's peak and off-peak times, and one's more expensive than the other. Energy is exactly the same. There are peak times where we have to put more generation on, which is mainly in the winter between 4 and 7. And but we tend to flatten that, and that we decided to do from a social good point of view. So we want to do that so everybody has access to reasonable power. But the challenge with that is it means that we don't try and reduce the demand that is costing the system a lot of money. So I think there are various pieces in this where if you add them together, so a decentralized system with an effective data and digital system layered over the top of it that's managing the algorithms it's using are effectively managing it economically as well as from a security point of view. Plus, then getting to a point where consumers can actually take action themselves to reduce their bills. That world will be my personal view is it will be a lower cost, more secure future energy world.
Okay. If and I think that probably people listening to this will probably know that about the reason for our high energy prices, but what and it being tied to the gas price. But if someone is wondering about why will energy prices come down, and does energy prices need to be decoupled from gas price, and maybe explaining how it's actually decided in order for them to come down? Is that part of it as well or not?
So I have a slightly different view on this.
Oh, go on.
So I don't think you absolutely need to decouple energy prices from gas prices, because that will happen naturally as you deploy more renewables. I mean, there are parts of the year where renewables set the marginal price, not gas. So and what we have at the moment is the fact that we have such a renewable system in the UK means that we've got lower energy prices than we would have. The challenges I think we've seen is that gas is partially the reason for this, but we've also seen costs coming through that would normally end up with the generators that are coming through to end consumer bills. So they've changed the way that they actually charge for things. There's one particular one called the balancing service user system costs. It's a very dull, very small piece of legislation that is stuck in the middle of something called the Balancing and Settlement Code. And one of the challenges with this is that we have changed the way that it's recharged. And I think when people did it, they didn't realize how big an impact it would have on end consumer bills. And it basically, again, it's one of these changes that is not sending the right signals to the behavior of generators. And so you're continuing to incentivize the historical behavior rather than trying to get generators to behave in a different way and reduce the overall cost of the system. So there are legacy pieces of regulation that flow through the system that have been put in place with all the best intentions that we need to review to see whether we can reduce some of the basic cost of the way the system is working.
You said, and I don't understand how it works, and maybe like explaining as if you were to like a 10-year-old. You said that sometimes it's linked to the gas price and sometimes it's linked to, like, how is our energy prices decided?
It decides on the marginal fuel. So basically what happens is there's a total amount of demand in the UK that everybody uses. So let's say it's 4 o'clock. What time is it now? It's like nearly 3 o'clock
Quarter. Yeah.
on a Tuesday afternoon. And there will be a certain amount of demand on the system. Okay. And to be able to deliver to that demand, you have nuclear in the stack. So that will always be there. So you have nuclear power. Then you've got what renewables you've got: wind power, solar power, hydropower. Then you've got the biogases of this world. And then for the rest of it, potentially you've got gas. But if all of that stacks up to too much, then you don't need the gas or you don't need the coal at the top. So you begin to get the marginal prices not set by gas, but it's set by whatever fuel is the last fuel that you need to fulfill the total amount of demand, which is why in the summer we see power prices going negative, because we've got too much renewable power on the system.
Right. Too much renewable power on the system. That sounds like almost like it couldn't. Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
Which is why we therefore need the incentive for people to go, we've got too much power now. Like, what can we use that for in
Yeah.
an incentive way? So and this is what I was talking about earlier. So could you use it in Bitcoin? Could you use it in green ammonia? Could you use it in green hydrogen? So that's what's happening all the time on the system. So when they say that the marginal the point with gas is, as we move forward, gas will become less and less of the marginal fuel. It is a marginal fuel. It absolutely sets the power price from time to time, but it's not always.
Marginal fuel means that it's like a small amount of the whole of the total energy
Yeah,
mix.
it's the bit that you needed at the end to make sure that you've got enough power. So it's basically saying, let's say you've got three people. You've got your nuclear guys, you've got your renewables guys, and you've got your gas guys, and you've got a bucket of water, and they've all got buckets of water, and you've got a central tub, and you need a certain amount of water. The nuclear guy pours theirs in first, then the solar guy and the renewables guys pours theirs in next, and then if there's any more needed, the gas guys pour it in, and each one defines what price they will pour that in, and therefore, if you're the last one, you define the total price of everything.
And that's constantly happening, like day to day, hour to hour.
Every half an hour of every day.
Interesting. And is that the same in other countries and
There's different mechanisms. I mean, the UK, sort of, we moved from a central pooling system where the pool would do that, but it was still a form of marginal pricing. It's basically, because most of the power that people buy and sell, they actually do that on long-term contracts. So if I'm a supplier of customers, I will have bought my power miles out, but I will probably need to buy a small amount or sell a small amount within the half an hour as I see what's happening in the marketplace. And so you won't sort of, the gas price in that particular half an hour will set the price for some of my power, but not all of it, because I will have already bought it forward.
So in terms of what's holding renewables back from being 100% of the energy mix in the UK, it's that making up that last part, which is the variability.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. That seems like I've never heard the problem phrased like that. It's always been in, I feel like in the media or places that I've heard about it, it's phrased as a more systemic, complicated issue rather than just like leveling out, when you
I've
get
probably
power.
simplified it a bit, Rob. So I mean, I have tried to simplify it as much as possible.
No, that's also very good. Okay.
I mean, but it is. I mean, it is a little bit more complicated. So if we look right now, the total GB energy mix, 46% of the total mix is gas, 28% is wind, 9% is nuclear, 7% biomass, 7% is imports, and 3% is solar. So
that's right
that's
now.
what's going on right now. Yeah.
Okay. And so in order for that, because that 46% of gas is really high.
It is. I mean, the average in the UK produces on average about just over 50% of its energy, electricity from low carbon technologies. So actually 46% is not far off the average. It's probably a little higher than normal. It's probably because it's not that windy and it's quite grey and nasty outside, probably. But I mean, I think from the point of view of what we've seen transform. So, I mean, if you think about it, was it 19, I'm trying to remember when they opened the market, 1998. I think it was 2%, and the rest was coal and gas and nuclear.
Heck, that's a huge change.
Yeah, it is a massive change. And what we're now seeing is that the system, that when renewables were small, they could disappear into that total amount of energy. Now they're much bigger. They 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 need better mechanisms to manage them on a half-hourly basis to make sure
Mm.
that we've got a balance, whether it's demand switching down or whether it's storage switching up or whether it's us being able to have better output from renewables themselves. All of those need to go into the mix to make sure that we can balance a system.
In terms of like I guess stepping back a bit and why maybe not just the UK but this like renewables or fossil fuel in the energy mix, is there people who are, you know, quote unquote bad actors who are trying to throw a spanner into the works of I mean the answer is probably yes, but to like I guess to what extent
Yes.
of trying to make the fossil fuel in the energy mix much higher than it actually needs to be? How much is that? Because I think that is a very, I think people are very aware of that in the green world, but how much is it going on versus it's just like it's just them meeting energy demands, you know, as BP, for example, would say.
I think there's a real. I think the route to look at that is to see how much money is being spent on political lobbying by those organisations. So that's the
Mm.
easy way. I mean, for any organisation, I mean, let's very simply think about the car. Okay, car is quite a nice example. So the car has an internal combustion engine, and for the last sort of, I can't remember how many, when it was for 50, 60 years, car companies have been working continually on the internal combustion engine, improving it, making it better. So their R&D and their commitment in terms of their supply chain, in terms of their manufacturing base, has been to the internal combustion engine. So changing that is a big significant step, and the key thing it's going to do to margins for businesses for their transition is reduce them. And so, on that basis, they are going to lobby as hard as they can to maintain their existing business model. So, you're always going to get whichever business you're in. So, whether you are in installing CCGTs or running CCGTs and gas companies,
CCGT,
combined gas turbine technology.
so
So,
a gas power plant.
yeah, big gas power plants.
Okay.
So all of those technologies are, anybody who is involved in that industry, they're going to continue to want to be involved in that industry. Now, over time, you may see that they begin to shift and they begin to go, actually, we can do this and this. We can operate in this new world, in this low carbon world, and we can still make a margin. But anybody who feels that their fundamental business model is going to be destroyed as a result of a shift will lobby against it. And there has undoubtedly been for at least 30 years. I mean, climate change has been documented for 40 years, I think it is now. And
Yeah.
so ever during that whole period, there has been lobbying going on to reduce the impacts of new technologies, to get rid of new technologies. And we are now at a point where new technologies look like they are more effective than the old technologies, and so potentially they stand on their own 2 feet without the climate argument. And that becomes, well, as soon as you get those two things aligned, everything becomes much more powerful. But yeah, they have been, and they will be continue to lobby until they can see, until they can't, they can see there's no way forwards in the existing business model, and then they'll shift their business model.
You founded a community-driven renewable energy business. Does lobbying by fossil fuel companies, does it anger you, or do you feel like it's just kind of like what you would expect them to do? Or are you quite indifferent?
So one of the reasons I set up a business was because that I felt that was one of the more effective ways of trying to counter it. So yeah, I mean, I absolutely recognize that it's part of what they do. It's part of what their business model is. I mean, getting angry about it, I guess. No, I didn't really get angry about it. I just tried to figure out ways to get around it and to make sure that you could continue to prove. I mean, the original concept of good energy was actually to create a business that could prove a new business model for the future, that could show that you could actually run a business in this world that could be run from a zero carbon point of view and be successful. So that was all of those things were really important because I mean, one of the things I was asked about to begin with was, why aren't you a charity? And I went, well, actually, I want to prove that this can be more than a charity, because otherwise I'm never going to convince any larger companies to change their business model to what I'm proposing. So that was the whole point. I'd
Yeah.
worked in government in the European Commission for a while and been lobbied by a lot of energy companies, so I kind of knew how it worked. And it was, and it doesn't just happen at energy company level, it happens at national level. So you have countries lobbying other countries and
Yeah.
using energy as a kind of, as a kind of, not quite a weapon, but not far off, weaponizing energy security.
So you said that you originally started Good Energy in order to prove that it could work, and
Yeah,
you would say that you've proven that, right?
I would hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Like, and so but that makes me wonder, like, if that was the first hurdle to cross, and it's now proven that it works, but it's not, it's there's still like opposition from this lobbying.
Yeah.
Does now the like what do you see as the next hurdle, that like it needs to become cost like competitive on all grounds, not
Oh God,
or
yes. So I mean,
like
I I think there are a couple of hurdles. So one of the things that's quite nice in terms of being an advisor to government is that I've come up through a commercial model, so I understand what works and what doesn't from a business point of view. If you want to change the way markets work, so that's quite helpful. And then if I think about what are the challenges that we need to approach? So some of them are organizational. So we need to think about the organizations that are in place to try and deliver on this zero carbon challenge and whether they are fit for purpose and how we need to manage them to deliver that. So you've got DESNZ, you've got NESO, and you've got Ofgem. So Ofgem is the regulator, DESNZ is the policymaker, and NESO is the network system operator, the national energy system operator. And those three are a kind of key part of how you deliver this, and how they operate together is so important to make sure that we can deliver this system. I think the other side, and which is the bit I get excited about as well, is the innovation side. So we still have a lot of work. So we may have the engineering side of the technologies working quite effectively. What we haven't got is the information and the data side working as well as it should do to make sure that we can run this system effectively. Because what we've done, Rob, is we've gone from 30 power stations, which are quite easy to monitor, 30 sites, to millions and millions, plus a load of customers as well. And we're
when
asked all to be active in this system. And that's really super hard.
when you say millions and millions, that's because people are generating their own energy and
Yeah.
becoming
Yeah.
a power generation. Yeah.
Small scale renewable generation on households, on industrial rooftops. You've got small scale renewables, wind power, large scale renewables as well. And then you've got all the other technologies as well that are coming in play.
Hmm. And is there a part that you feel, because I guess I'm a bit struck by like how you're incredibly pragmatic and unemotional about like the seemingly, I think people get very annoyed about the bad actors, and lose sight of the pragmatic, like, this is what we need to do to fix it. And I'm quite struck by how you almost don't pay attention to that. It's just like something like humans are going to do that. They're going to defend their position. They're not going to want to change. And we just need to like do this. Is that like a mindset you've cultivated, or?
And I'm not sure. I mean, I think it's probably from working out what's the most successful way through that, because I think if you start to get angry, quite often what happens with anger is it just bounces off. So I did a really interesting process once. I don't know whether you've ever heard of something called a constellation process. Use it
No.
in psychotherapy quite often, but it's begun to be used in complex decision making within corporates and organizations. Anyway, I went along to the RSA in London, and it was being run. I'm trying to remember who was involved, but there were a load of the Ashton Trust, I think, were running it, which are sort of environmental charity. Um, and they ran this constellation. So the concept is that each person embodies a particular actor in a situation. So somebody became an oil company, somebody became a protester, somebody became a politician, and you put them on the floor, and then they act in the way that you would expect them to, and see what happens, and see what resolves. And what was very interesting about that, and it doesn't always give you the answers, but it gives you some sort of concept of how you can think about these things. But the thing that really struck me was that when you see the bad actors facing off against the activists, there is almost like a dual energy that matches each other, that gets stuck, that there's an enjoyment on both sides, and actually it can almost get in the way of getting things done and getting on and moving forwards, because some of the bad actors, you're going to have to convince they're going to have to become good actors, and if you keep shouting at them, it becomes very difficult for them to change their position. But if you say, actually, we think you should do this, and we think you should become a better actor, and you will have a better return, or you'll have something better as a result of becoming a better actor, then that shifts the conversation. So I guess that's that's kind of my philosophy related to it. I'm not saying it always works. I think activism is super important. I definitely think it's important because it means that we open up conversations. But I think my role is to be pragmatic and go, let's find a pragmatic solution to try and convert the bad actors to good actors.
It's interesting because I had a chat with a psychologist called Dr. Renee Lertzman, and I guess what you kind of described is your theory of change, like how you think people change.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that exercise that you did changed what you have as your theory of change. And I'm intrigued if it did change it much, and what it was before that you changed it away from.
I think actually what it was it, I don't think I had an intuition of what I thought my theory of change was before. When I saw this enacted out, it actually consolidated what I already thought, because and part of that had been developed through, I'd worked in academia, I'd worked in government, and what I'd seen in both was a lack of pace and a lack of responsibility to actually the people that you needed to deliver to. And so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to work with consumers, because actually I felt that individuals quite often wanted to make change. They wanted to do things. And I guess the piece around trying to model what a good actor might look like in the future came out of the work over those years then. So it wasn't there originally, but it evolved into that. Um, but and it was about being cleverer and more nimble than the bad actors, trying to kind of show them up, but doing it in a slightly more subtle way than necessarily being a full-on activist.
Are there ways that you think that there are untapped or unrealized opportunities or potential for people to do that a lot more? Because I think that's not a way that people, I think it's quite, as you said, it's almost quite enjoyable to like heads, and the idea of being more nimble, or like having an argument that outsmarts your competition, or like getting around it in some way. I heard you say instead of going over the mountain, figure out what's on the other side of the mountain and go around it.
Yeah.
It's like a bit like that. Like,
Yeah.
what other ways in for people, because someone who's listening 43 minutes in is probably like cares about sustainability enough to listen to that much. So
Yeah.
what can they do to adopt more of that, like that approach?
Well, I think it really depends on, I think, identify who you are and where you want to act, because I do, as I said, I still think there's a big role for activism. I think we're not very good at, we've suppressed activism in the UK, which I feel very sad about. And I think we need to understand what responsible activism should look like and how it plays an important part in our democracy. And actually, one of the things I think we should encourage is actually doing some proper academic research that starts and goes, what is the role of activism? Where does it work very importantly in our societal change? And how do we embed it within how we do democracy? Because we can't just try and lock everybody up. It just doesn't make any sense. So we need to think about, what is activism? What does it do? And where is it super important? And we mustn't lock it down. On the other side of it, that I also think, that you need to decide, who are you? Because if you love coming up with new ideas or new technologies, or you want to try something out new, use your existing knowledge to go and do that, then maybe you are an entrepreneur. Maybe you should go and work with an entrepreneurial company that's looking at coming up with new solutions. Or are you somebody who is just very practical, very good at getting things delivered? Then go and help somebody else who is trying to come up with new ideas but not very good at delivery. So I think you play to your strengths and whatever role you want to play. But I see the three key areas is activism, policy making, and business delivery, are the key pieces to making an economy work. And if you got those working really effectively, you can move much faster.
That's interesting. Activism, government and policy, and business. Because I don't think that. So what role does in like, we've talked about activism a bit and we've talked about business, but does does government and policy needs to move faster, and listen to like what people need and want? Is that the kind of overarching
Yeah,
description of the change?
I think we've got into a bit of a process where I think there's been so much lobbying over the last sort of 10, 20 years. I think government has felt a bit stuck sometimes in trying to make decisions, because you can come at policy from a pure economic theory point of view, but you then need to think about, actually, how does that interface with the reality of the world? And so what are the real things that get? It's not, when you run a business, it's not just about money. It's also about sort of planning, or it's about people, or it's about innovation technology, or it's about, there's a bunch of other things that completely impact on how well you could deliver what you're trying to do as a business. And I think that link gets lost when you have over lobbying. Government goes into lockdown and doesn't want to listen to anybody. And that is a big problem, because you need if you've got activism and policymakers working too closely together, potentially you design policies that don't then work effectively. They might work, but they'll be inefficient, and therefore you'll add cost to the whole system. So you kind of need them all inside the tent in a balanced conversation. And government's role, and I think what government has to get better at, is how it holds those two tensions, delivers policies that can deliver on both of those sides.
Hmm. I'm I'm intrigued as that, like, individual consumers or people, like with their own views, wasn't like part of those three
Yeah.
things.
I mean, I guess I see individuals coming in three sub loops under each one of those. So individuals come in from a business point of view, from their customers. Individuals come through from an activism point of view, whether they're people who are active in organizations or supporting organizations, so sort of funders of organizations. And then government obviously should, individuals is, I think, a more, we don't regularly engage with individuals from a government point of view. So we have a lot of consultations, but we don't actively go out and work with them. And I think I'm trying to remember what it was called, but there were various people forum that have been worked through in the last couple of years, where I've seen some really interesting work where individuals become part of the discussion around policy, and we need to do that more as a society. I think we just expect democracy to work without really telling people what they need to think about, or giving them information, or helping them figure out how democracy works. And as a result, I think we get some very odd results from our democratic process. And we need to invest more time and effort into explaining to people the information that they are receiving. Because at the moment, the information people receive on policy tends to be through the media, which then comes through its own political lens. And so
Hmm.
that's the piece I think we need to move forward on. And I think we're very stuck on, personally.
Hmm. Can I take a bit of a left turn?
Mm.
Because I chatted to Mike Berners-Lee, and when we
Yes.
talked about energy, he was one of his main points is that one of the main issues is energy is the amount of energy we consume and use.
Mhm.
Um, do you think that that is a problem, and do you think that we need to reduce it?
So we have been reducing the amount of energy we use per household for years. I think it's still important. I think for me, what's more important from a cost point of view is when we use energy. So
Hmm.
if we all use energy at the same time, it costs the whole system much more. So there are that it's just how it operates. My personal view is I would like to see um, us thinking not just about the total amount of energy we reduce, but can we reduce energy at particular times of day that put less stress on the system?
So if we had a flatter energy use,
Yeah,
but still used the same amount, then that would be all right.
that would be more cost effective, and therefore you could use renewables more effectively, in my personal view.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Um, do you think that like rising because I guess I feel that in the energy sphere especially like there's kind of the narrative of people need to reduce how much energy they use and not just being like whether they switch on their lights. It's like the
yeah.
amount of stuff we buy, like degrowth, like the amount of stuff we buy, you know, what we consume. And then there's the alternate side of like we like we can innovate and where our power and energy comes from is the issue, not how much we use. And
No,
I'm
I think we should be reducing as much per everything that we use as much as possible. Definitely. I agree with that. I just I sometimes think that we kind of go, all our houses are terribly inefficient and we must reduce them. And there are elements of that that is true, but on the same side, we shouldn't just be thinking about just m sort of taking down the total amount. We should also be thinking about when we use it. In
hmm,
terms of household goods or things that we buy, absolutely. My view on production is that we should absolutely be trying to minimize energy use and thinking about it and measuring it. I mean, I did a quick thing on local bakeries. I know it sounds a bit weird, but I did an article on it, and I was talking to somebody locally here, and they were telling me that another bakery had gone through a B Corp process, and as part of the B Corp process, they'd have to manage their energy. They'd had to measure it all, and they discovered that one of their vacuum machines was using double the amount of energy of the other vacuum machine. Now, they would never have found that out unless they had to do the energy audit. But by doing the energy audit, they found out that something just wasn't working. So I think we need to care about energy more. We need to make it a much more important part of when we think about our supply chain in business. And we need to minimize it, obviously, as much as possible. But we also need to think about the time of day that we use it. It's not just about minimizing use.
I think because I guess this is kind of around like it's the intersection of like behavior change. Like how much is it? It's not a individual. It's not fully an individual's responsibility to change when they use energy, but it's maybe partially their responsibility to be mindful of, or like have an off, incentivize it so it's
Oh,
peak and off
yeah,
peak.
yeah, and I mean, the point is that w- our phones now, you can set your phone up to minimize its energy use by changing the things that you use on it, by and that you would normally do that because you don't want to run out of power when you're sort of walking around or on traveling. So we've got technology devices that can already start to think through how do we minimize energy use. We've got potentially electric cars that start to think about, okay, so when are you going to charge them? How do we do that? So the point is to make this automatic so that in our households, the household should essentially be run like a mini power station that maximizes and minimizes at the right time of day and incentivizes the customers to do that, but not expect them to do it themselves. I mean, my view would be I just want to come home and plug something in and it fixes it for me, but it doesn't, it minimizes its use and it also uses it at the right time of day.
Hmm. Um, I'm intrigued because you mentioned about like the tech that we're using, and something that comes up a lot in the energy discussion is AI and how much energy it uses. Do you
Yes.
think that like the amount of energy that AI uses is an issue?
Yeah,
Um, and
absolutely do.
what do you think we should do about it?
Well, I think I mean, I'm hoping, I mean, I may be wrong, so forgive the physicists if I got my physics wrong, but at the moment, so one of the things we do is we use digital AI, digital systems to support AI use a lot of energy. And you use a digital system because it gives you accuracy. But there are a lot of things that we use in AI, like fake pictures of Santa coming to lunch with people. Somebody showed me a video of that the other day. um, that doesn't need accuracy. Sort of searching on sort of kitten sort of videos doesn't need accuracy. So we need to start to be clever about how we use our AI and how much energy that particular form of AI uses. So where you need high accuracy, then you can use a digital system. My understanding is that we're now looking at quantum computing, which gives you lower accuracy and has much lower energy usage, but you could use that for areas of AI where you really don't need a high level of accuracy and it's more for enjoyment. So I think there's this really balance. I think we need to start thinking about AI systems and what technologies you actually need to do what. So it's a bit like saying we're going to use precision laser tooling to cut my bread. I really don't need that. I think that's what we're doing in AI at the moment. I can use a bread knife, it's fine. My bread knife will work, and I can use precision laser tooling for something else. So I think we're not thinking about AI in the right way at the moment, and we've gone gung ho and got terribly carried away. Um, let let's reduce the energy needs that we need on the areas where we don't need high levels of accuracy. Would be my view.
Um, I read an article like a few days ago about how Elon Musk's Grok is powered by some massive coal power. I think it was gas power station. I think it
Yeah,
was maybe in the Guardian. And and obviously like energy, big tech companies like Google and others are like buying a lot into nuclear because they need to power that, like the
yeah.
limitations of AI is energy, not some other limitation. Do you is like where is that a good thing that they're like investing into nuclear in your opinion, or like should they be like, because tech companies are kind of then stepping into the energy world, um and they
Yeah,
from yeah, go on.
so they've been stepping into the energy world for a while, I think. I mean, I don't think this is something new. And originally they were looking at supporting renewables, but I think since they've had a switch in political positioning, they've now moved into more neutral technologies that they can't be told off for. So I do think it's an issue from the point of view of it becomes highly politicized what technologies they're using to power these sites. Um, I think what is interesting is I don't think they've put enough effort into thinking about how they reduce the amount of energy they need. I also don't think they've put enough effort into thinking about how do you recoup some of the energy that's wasted as a result of cooling. So, I mean, I think I saw something that was, I mean, these are always a bit of one-offs, but they're fascinating to look at. So I think there's a whole Finnish town that is now that's heated, so big heat load during the winter, by an AI system, basically, by a data data center that's need cooling. So I think my personal view is I don't think they're doing enough to be smart about it. I think they're being they're being a bit old. It feels about a bit like the internal combustion engine. It feels like they've done something and they just continue to do the same bloody thing over and over again. I think they need to be a bit cleverer about it. And actually, I think we could come up with a better outcome.
Mm. What would that better outcome be?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say, okay, why am I powering this AI system and what is it doing? Have a differentiated end user approach so you can decide what kind of systems you're using, and minimize the power needs. It would be absolutely number one. And then look to
Mm.
start to think about secondary usage of the energy output because you've got a load of heat coming off them. Where do you use that? In heat systems. So can you use the ground as a heat sink, for example, long-term heat storage, for winter usage with something like a ground source heat pump. So you begin to kind of think about what it's rather than just how do we power these things, it's like what else can these things do for us? Um,
Mm.
and I think, yeah, I think potentially we need to think about the algorithms they're using and are they a bit lazy in the terms of the way the algorithms are developed and they learn? Should we be able to reduce that slightly so that they're not using as much data?
Yeah. Um, a bit of I'm intrigued on your views on something. And it's like a hypothetical question. So, if you had £1 million, £1 billion, and £100 billion to spend on getting the best bang for your buck on moving our energy industry and system towards where it needs to go, how would you spend it? And it doesn't have to be on infrastructure like in the traditional sense. It could be on some kind of campaign or policy or lobbying or public information campaign.
Okay, interesting. Uh, so I think I would do some of the grid reinforcement. I'd probably do a couple of more grid connections to mainland Europe, so you've got a better
Yeah.
integrated European grid. I would then look at the digital data systems that are in the national energies, the NESO, and think about what improvements can we make, um, and look at creating a kind of incubator fund that goes beyond what's going on already. So basically, supercharge the incubator funds. They're looking at energy efficiency that we've just been talking about, sort of on the big growth areas like the data centers, looking at um, time of day response and algorithms, so that whole piece about smart energy systems. Um, I put I put automatic meter readers in every single home, not smart meters, but just roll out automatic meter readers because smart meters have got an extra functionality. We just need every meter to have a half value meter now in the UK so that we can manage the system better.
That
Um,
would tell the energy company how much is. What would that do?
So what at the moment, what you've got is you've got smart meters which tell the energy companies what's being used in every half an hour, but it has a whole sort of another piece on it which was required by the original smart meter program, which was all about communication two-way, and you've got something called the DCC and interconnection sort of networks that all seem terribly overcomplicated as far as I can see. I would much prefer just to put a meter reader that can be just read automatically and that's it, straightforward, very easy, into every home in the UK. So use the existing smart meters, but everything else just put something called an AMR, put it in, and therefore what it means is the whole system. So your whole data system and energy system in the UK knows what's going on at every level in real time.
Hmm.
Uh, so that's what I would do on that. Um, and then what kind of campaign would I run? I think
That's
I
what I'm
think
intrigued by.
I quite like to sort of start to do the democracy kind of information campaign. So really creating localized debates around energy with informed participants so that people really begun to understand it much better than we do today. Probably and climate, so energy and climate. So there's an improved understanding of what we're talking about rather than the filter that we see through the press today.
Hmm. I'm chatting to Phil Corbell, who founded or was co-founder of Carbon Literacy Project, which kind of is, his aim is to have national or international literacy of carbon.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of a step in
Okay,
that
I'll give him
direction.
money. I don't need to do it. He can do it.
I'll call him up and say he's got a check. And last few, I'm intrigued what you're fed up of being asked,
When am I fed up of being asked?
or topics.
I guess, what am I fed up of being asked? There's a lot of things I'm fed up about. I'm not sure as whether I'm being asked them or not, but it just that the rhetoric of what I'm really fed up about. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my head around how to answer that. I'm really fed up of people just not listening to the science and looking at the data. So that's what I'm really fed up about. It's like the language that I see and I read and people believe around whether it's about renewables or whether it's about climate change or whether it's about anything. I'm just bored of the fact that we have a society that seems to be so short-termist and wants to excuse itself from doing anything and therefore negates any information that comes out of the scientific community. It's just very boring. I find that very boring.
Yeah, you said there was things that you feel fed up about, but nobody asks you about. That's an example of that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything that people like, or what is to you a very, very obvious question, but to other people, they just ask it over and over?
I mean, I think the obvious question to me is that when we look at rising energy prices, and everybody goes, "Oh, it's this or it's that," or "This is making it," or there's a lot of narrative out there um, that tries to oversimplify and blame different parts of the system. The reality is, it isn't that simple. It is quite complicated in terms of how you make up the bill. We absolutely should be focused on minimizing the cost to the consumer. Absolutely. And we need to make some big pieces. But what I get frustrated about is it's like things like the price cap, for example. Nobody asked me that question. They keep saying marginal prices set by gas. That's why we've got high energy prices. Well, to be honest, one of the other reasons I personally think, this is my theory, that we have high energy prices is that we have a price cap. And what happens in a price cap is that everybody buys their power at the same time because that's when the price cap is set. And therefore the price peaks at that point. So if everybody goes to buy, let's say, apples at the same time, apples tend to become scarce and therefore the price goes up. That's exactly what happens in the energy market. So because everybody has to buy their power at the same time to hedge forward for the price cap means you get peak prices at that point. I personally think the price cap has done a brilliant job over the last 10, 15 years. It now needs to go and allow prices to come further down, is my personal view.
And what question do you wish people would ask you more?
Mm. I would like to what question more? That's a really hard question. I think I would like them to ask me more about how do we accelerate this even faster than we are right now? And how do we make the UK as a shining example of low carbon renewables that can deliver at lower costs?
Hmm. I'm really tempted to ask you that question, but I'll I'll wrap it up there because I feel like in what you've said, you've kind of answered that. So yeah, thank you very much, Julia. I've really, really enjoyed this.
Thanks, Rob. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I warbled a bit on some of my answers, but it's like it's not always that easy to get into these subjects.
No, it's not. But yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.